From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Hamish Macbain and welcome to Who Wants to Be a London Mayor?
We'll see, won't we? I want to expose the fact that he'll do a consultation and then take absolutely no notice of it whatsoever.
Yes, I'm really proud that I was the mayor who froze TfL fares between 2016 and 2021. What Londoners want to see is a mayor doing his job he's required to do by statute.
A series of special episodes of the Standard podcast focusing on London's bitterly contested mayoral election.
I've rented in London for the last 13 years and I've just seen things get worse and worse for myself and for friends and other people I know.
During COVID, I lived in a big set of flats in Dalston, and our landlord is one billionaire who owns all of them. And we all got together during the pandemic to ask for money off during COVID. And then he sent a letter back saying because we were trapped in our flats, we should pay more money because the wear and tear on his flats is increasing.
In London, you really don't have to look hard to find renting horror stories. Rats, mould, rents that rise without warning, tenancy agreements that end without warning, landlords from hell, ridiculous competition for even the most paltry of rooms. Only this morning I was speaking to a friend who says the only way she and her housemates can afford to live in the capital is for their lounge to double up as a bedroom. Last year, private landlords in London collectively took £3.5 billion in rent. Buying a house, meanwhile, remains a fantasy for most. And social housing? There's a waiting list of hundreds of thousands of people, a number that makes the 40,000 councils that Sadiq Khan has promised to build if he gets elected seem insignificant, to say the least.
I can commit to delivering at least 40,000 new council homes for our city by the end of this decade.
People have had enough, particularly people like the London Renters Union. That's why I've come down to a rally they're holding at Hamilton House in King's Cross. It's also the launch of their campaign to fight for rent controls.
Thanks everyone for coming. We've got a lot of people joining on Zoom as well, on our webinar, and there's lots of people on this room. And it's not so surprising, right, because we're all sick of paying very, very high rents.
My name's Siobhan. I'm the campaign officer at London Renters Union, and we've organised this event tonight, which is called Building the Movement for Rent Controls, and that's because our rents are completely out of control. I've lived in London for about 3 years now, but I lived in Manchester before that, but I've been involved in housing campaigning for 7 or 8 years now.
And do you have a personal renting horror stories that have gone on in London?
I mean, from a personal perspective, I moved to the city and then became very unwell, and now I have chronic health issues. So I've been renting for a lot of time in London, in receipt of benefits, which has been very challenging. And just because the levels of insecurity, it means that I can't manage my health, and it's been very difficult. And
yeah, I mean, it feels like every other person you speak to in London has got some kind of renting horror story going on. I mean, it's just feels like an epidemic at this point, and something really needs to be done. What do you think the London Mayor and the government really need to do?
Well, obviously Sadiq has already committed to rent controls, and that's kind of his key kind of policy, and he's asking for the government to give him the power to introduce rent controls. But the kind of government need to step in and kind of bring in rent controls, and let's see what happens when a Labour government comes into power. Hopefully they're going to promise to bring them in, and Sadiq hopefully will kind of use his position as mayor to kind of really push the government to kind of bring in rent controls and give him the powers to lower our rents.
So are you broadly supportive of Sadiq Khan? Do you think he's done a reasonable job in terms of your area?
I think Sadiq's intentions are in the right place with housing policy and kind of trying to lift people out of poverty because of their housing insecurity. But I think he needs to go a step further, and hopefully if a Labour Party do come into government, he kind of uses that position a lot more, and it's not just kind of these kind of statements or popular policies. He actually puts those things into action and really uses his kind of power to push the Labour Party.
I mean, I always hear stories about mould and rats and things. What would you say are the biggest issues that are facing London renters and the most horrible issues?
I mean, I think the majority of renters in London are facing kind of bad disrepair in their properties because landlords have just chronically underinvested in housing because it's cheaper for them not to make repairs. So that means that the quality of houses is very low and people are living in very substandard conditions, particularly in temporary accommodation, which is kind of some of the worst in London. And I think what we're kind of seeing is councils don't properly regulate, and that's their role. They tend to just mediate and be very soft for landlords, and that is a lot of the campaigning that that we do is to try to get councils to do their jobs properly, and the Mayor of London can take that a step further, step in and start to kind of like have better regulation of councils and bring all the councils up to the standards of what they should be doing as their role.
What about social housing? I mean, what sort of state is that in London, would you say?
Well, there's like over 300,000 people on the social housing register in London. Like, that is a mammoth amount of people, and Sadiq has committed to 40,000 council homes. 22,000 are like kind of in the pipeline to be built, but that is just a small dent in the amount of people that are waiting to be housed. So he needs to kind of further that commitment and kind of build more social housing, but also kind of bring back like private rented housing into council housing, so like buying back stock and kind of expanding on some of the kind of pledges that he has at the moment, because it's not enough right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to do something radical like that rather than just, even if he, with the best will in the world, if he built twice as many houses, they're not going to be done for years. So it's going to take. So he needs to claw back the properties.
And like that, we're not going to see those effects for the long term. And that's why we're here tonight, to kind of fight for rent controls, because it's something that can be introduced really kind of like in the short term and really kind of alleviate the pressures people are feeling.
Yeah, I mean, stuff needs to be done quickly, basically, doesn't it? Because things are feeling precarious, to say the least, for renters in London.
Yeah, it's beyond precarious. It's like it's a full-scale housing emergency, and like our membership is just growing and growing, and like people, like we're just kind of being evicted in our droves. Like rent is kind of just like coming to like astronomical levels. It's kind of London has become unlivable for ordinary people, essentially.
In terms of the mayoral election, then, I mean, Sadiq aside, are there any of the other candidates do you think have good ideas and policies that would help?
Well, the London Greens have always been very strong on housing, and Zoe Garbett, who's the kind of candidate for the mayoral election, has been putting forward some like very kind of bold positions. For example, like rent controls, and kind of like coming forward with very concrete ways of trying to like push to get them, and also kind of trying to push developers to introduce like a 50% quota on all new developments that build council housing. So at the moment it's just affordable housing, which is not even affordable, it's 80% of market rate. So the Greens, like Zoe, is going a lot further than what Sadiq is, and kind of providing a big kind of counterweight and kind of pushing those bold policies forward.
And what about Susan Hall?
I honestly don't know what Susan Hall is pushing. I think there's some kind of expansion of housing and building on brownfield sites, but that's as far as I can understand from the manifesto page on our website.
I noticed you've got a t-shirt saying sex work is work, being a landlord isn't.
Yes, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I made it. I screen printed them.
Okay, very, very cool t-shirt.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick ad break. Coming up in part 2...
My rent has gone up by £300 a month. I got a letter from my letting agent saying, we're legally obliged to serve you this Section 21 eviction notice.
Who Wants to Be a London Mayor will be back in just a moment. Welcome back.
Hey, my name's Tom. I'm a member of the London Renters Union, and I'm here today because my rent has gone up by £300 a month.
So tell us a bit more. Let's go into a bit more detail about what happened with your rental situation. When did this happen? What happened? How did it happen?
So I got a letter from my letting agent, and they sent me a nice, friendly letter saying, there's nothing like getting an unexpected legal notice, but we're legally obliged to serve you this Section 21 eviction notice. And what that is, we're on a assured short-hold tenancy, a one-year tenancy, and it'll come to the end of it. And what that means is it goes automatically onto a rolling tenancy. So the strategy, I think, is to give you a Section 21 eviction notice, and either you sign another year or they just evict you, right? Otherwise, they'd have to give you, I think, 6 months' notice for a rent increase on a rolling contract. So with that, they said, we've looked at the market, and houses in the area or properties in the area have gone up by, I think it was £400 a month. But because you're such good tenants, we'll only put yours up by £300 a month, and that's between two people. So, I crunched the numbers, and that's a 16% increase. Obviously, inflation's 4%. Average rent increase is about 6%. My pay rise was 0%. So I replied saying, thanks for the offer, but that's not really affordable. Yeah, my friend and I, we really value our home. We'd like to stay here. Could we look at a rise that's more reasonable? And they replied to say, there'll be no more negotiation. We've got a waiting list, so take it or leave it. We'll just give the flat to somebody else. So they kind of strong-armed me into signing this pretty eye-watering rent increase.
Could you tell tell us a bit more about your personal story when it comes to renting in London?
Sure. So I moved here only about 9 months ago, actually, and I moved in with a friend who'd actually was moved out, so we kind of like swapped around on the contract, and then I had to find a flatmate online, so I went on Spare Room, which I think is where a lot of people go. It's interesting. I put on an advert, and within a week, I think I didn't really look for a week, and then I had 70 people come to me, and basically everybody who had a photo and didn't seem like a murderer or something, I said, come and have a look, and people were saying to me, "Oh, thank you for replying. Like I've messaged 40 people, and you're the first person to reply." So that's the kind of market it is out there, and I didn't. One of the reasons they strong-arm me into signing up again for another year is because I don't want to be in that market, right? That seems like a nightmare, so stressful. And my flatmate, who I found on Spare Room, it works in retail as well. So he's looking for another job at the moment because he can't afford to pay the rent. I mean, even I'm in IT, I'm a software engineer. I earn a decent salary. I haven't got a London waiting because of reasons, but I'm struggling, right? At the moment, I've got kind of negative money every month, and I'm trying to figure out how to make up that difference, and that's before the extra £300 a month kicks in.
When's that kick in?
That kicks in next month, so I've got that to look forward to.
And you're going to fight it?
So my understanding is now I've signed the contract, they've got me, there's nothing I can do really. The alternative would be when they say they're going to evict you, it doesn't mean that's the day you go, it means that's the day they can start court proceedings, which may take weeks or months, so it's like a long process. But obviously you don't want to damage things like references. One consideration was I didn't want to damage the relationship with the landlord, but they kind of did that already by basically taking the mask off and saying, we will just kick you out, we don't care about you.
So yeah, it's been a really interesting evening. I knew I was going to hear some horror stories, but quite how horrible the horror stories were, I wasn't really prepared for. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of helplessness that you're encountering, and people just having their rents just put up, being scared. And it's more just the sense that I got from talking to a lot of people is that it's not only the money, it's the sense of just every day waking up with this anxiety of not feeling secure in where you're living. And you exert enough, you get stressed enough with work and travelling on the crowded tube or whatever. The one sanctuary you should have is being at home and just being, somewhere safe where you don't have to worry about whether it's going to be there the next day. And I just feel like a lot of people in London haven't got that. So that's it from this episode of Who Wants to Be a London Mayor. You can find out more about the London mayoral election in the Evening Standard newspaper or on our website standard.co.uk. The Standard podcast will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m.